Well, hi, Andrew Bell here with you. I'm sure, like most of us, we're pleased to see the relaxation of many of the restrictions, and we're now hopeful that we'll continue to manage this situation well and avoid the risks that some people are touting of a second wave of COVID-19. I'm extremely optimistic. Following my summary of April in my last e-newsletter, I had a large number of inquiries from people wanting more information, and I gather most of those inquiries were from investors. As the rental market makes up a very large proportion of the entire residential real estate market, we realise that what happens in the rental market does have a very profound effect on the real estate market as a whole. So today I'll give you more detailed information about our residential rental market. Now, if by any chance anyone would like more details regarding the commercial market, I suggest you reply back to this e-news, as it does differ so differently between retail, office and industrial space and different areas of the Gold Coast. So a response on information provided would need to be adapted to your area of interest. Now let's start with the much talked about hit on the individual tenants and the requests for rent relief. It appears that across the nation, through most rent rolls, that request for rent relief came in around 20% of the total rent roll. For many, rent has remained, or rent relief has remained at those levels simply because inexperienced property managers took the request at face value. However, when digging deeper and working with tenants, and with the assistance from many of the programs federal and state governments have put in place, we were able to get our rent relief levels down to just 6%. Within that group, we've had a small number of landlords who've been impressed with their long-term tenants, appreciative of it, and they were happy to provide them with a rent-free period for a couple of months, a forgiveness of rent. However, the great majority have simply provided rent reductions for 3 months on the proviso that the amount by which the rent has been reduced for that period will be paid back during the term of their lease or at the end of their lease. I must say, with the exception of just a handful of people, there's been enormous goodwill from both landlords and tenants in this regard. Now to the bigger question of vacancies. 3% vacancy for the past 40 plus years has been considered a balanced market. Vacancy rates above 3% means a higher level and therefore softening in rent. And vacancy rates below 3% mean a strong demand for rentals, which sees rents rising. Previously, through my 45 odd years in the industry, the lowest I have seen vacancy rates was around 2%. However, by mid-March of this year, our rent roll, which is the largest on the Gold Coast, so a good barometer, recorded a 0.4% vacancy. It's what I describe as an acute shortage situation. Whilst that wasn't reflective of the rest of the industry, which was around 2%, it was an incredibly low rate of almost 0% vacancy. However, the minutes that self-isolation and levels of restrictions came in, airlines stopped flying, borders were closed, and fundamentally most hotels shut down, all of the properties that were in holiday let situations and Airbnbs and so on faced the prospect of a long period of vacancy and no rent. It caused many of those people who own those type properties to immediately switch from holiday letting into permanent rentals. In the space of 4 weeks, vacancies across the entire Gold Coast rose from just 1,200 properties in mid-March to 3,500 properties by early April. I could give you a lot more information about the breakdown of how that impacted in different regions and different property types, such as apartments versus houses, but will make this report way too long. The immediate situation was a huge supply of rental properties, and because of COVID-19 situation, very little inquiry, certainly late March and into early April. But my goodness, how the situation has changed. Rapidly, we saw an acceleration in the second half of April of rental demand. We have now become so busy that we've had to increase staff levels to handle the volume of rental inquiries and inspections. We're now letting properties at record levels and looking deeper into what we have identified as an interesting trend. More than 50% of the rental inquiries were people who have moved from interstate, and particularly out of Victoria. Our early research is telling us that these people were sitting at home during the late March and early April period and were reassessing their world. Some had lost their jobs, some who owned business felt that their business would never open again, and some just wanted a better life. huge numbers of people have made that bold decision to make their move now. Not next year, but now. COVID-19 has forced their hand and they've seized the moment. It is certainly helping to wade through the big increase in vacancies. However, that was unlikely to be enough to stabilise that big vacancy factor in the short term. What will be a game changer is when airlines start flying again, hopefully shortly. Borders are open and domestic tourism fires up again. The Gold Coast is expecting a huge influx of holiday makers, especially with the upcoming June-July school holiday period. As such, many of the properties that came out of holiday letting will go back into holiday letting. As quickly as we saw the big increase in supply for permanent rentals, we're likely to see much of that disappearing over a period of time. And so this situation of high vacancies is just a very short-term knock-on effect of COVID-19. There is a whole other expertise that will be needed to be worked on as we move forward through some pretty challenging economic conditions that are likely to face us, certainly through the balance of this year with higher levels of unemployment and most likely an extended period of a recession. Our office has certainly had a lot of experience through conditions such as these in the past, and the commonly used term "this will pass" certainly does apply, but it does need good strategies in landlord-tenant relations and around vacancies and rentals to ride that period of time. Great to see that a few of the restrictions that were placed on real estate have now fundamentally been lifted. With just a little restriction around the numbers of people, we're back into public auctions, and from June onwards, pretty much complete freedom. And our open homes were back on last weekend. We're thrilled to see the great volumes of people who were back out and about at our opens on that weekend. I trust your world is getting back to a little degree of normality, although I know it will never be the same again. Just as 9/11 had such a dramatic effect around security and the way that we travel, I'm sure COVID-19 will have a huge ongoing impact on how the hospitality industry and so many others industries function in the future. I couldn't be prouder to be an Australian for the way we've handled 2020 through droughts, fires, floods, and now, of course, COVID-19. I'll be with you in a fortnight's time. Stay safe till then.